I faced betrayal when my wife cheated with my best friend and found a way to rebuild my life. Our journey together began with such promise. From the start, I was captivated by her smile, her presence. Everything about her lit up my world. We were young and full of hope, believing that nothing could ever come between us. My long work hours were meant to secure our future, but I missed the signs that things were changing. Over the years, I became consumed by work. It wasn't that I stopped caring about Claire, but our shared vision slowly drifted into separate paths. Then, one night, everything unraveled. I was half asleep when her soft voice cut through the dark, almost lost in the sound of rain, but something in her tone grabbed my attention. "What did you just say, Claire?" I asked, feeling a sudden dread. She turned on the bedside lamp, her eyes avoiding mine. "I'm unhappy, Frank," she whispered, and those words struck me deeply. Her unhappiness wasn't just a word, it carried the weight of everything crumbling between us. "Unhappy with me?" I asked, my heart breaking as tears welled up in her eyes. She couldn't even look at me. "I don't know why, Frank, I just am," she replied, leaving me struggling to understand. Frustration took over as I asked if she wanted to leave me. Her silence answered for her, and I felt a surge of anger. I jumped out of bed, unable to process her world-shattering revelation. Claire reached out, but I stepped back, not ready to comfort her. "Guilt? Do you or don't you want to be married to me?" I demanded. She couldn't answer, and her silence told me everything. Exhausted, I decided to sleep in my office, too tired to continue the conversation. But then her frustration erupted. "I want to feel loved," she shouted. "I want a man who wants me around, who makes me feel sexy." Her words hit hard, and suddenly it became clear someone else made her feel that way. "Doug," she finally admitted, and my world stopped. I couldn't respond. I just sat there watching her cry. Doug, my ex-best friend. It sounds so cliché, but there's no way to fully describe the devastation of discovering that your wife and your best friend have betrayed you. Both of them choosing each other over you amplifies the pain beyond words. The only word that fits is pain. No synonyms capture the depth of it. I wanted to respond, but couldn't. There was so much to say, but it all felt meaningless. Instead, I left the room, retreating to my office and locking the door. I couldn't face Claire, not trusting myself in that moment. She followed me, knocking and calling my name, but I stayed silent, overwhelmed by the pain and images of her with Doug. Eventually, she gave up, and I was left in the quiet, though not truly alone. Sleep eluded me as my mind replayed everything, trying to pinpoint when things began to fall apart. There were no obvious signs, no declining affection. Our relationship seemed normal, if not passionate, at least stable. Yet, somewhere along the line, Doug had inserted himself into our lives in a way I never saw coming. I had known Doug for nearly 13 years. We started out as friends and colleagues, working side by side until I got promoted. Our friendship survived the strain, but his departure for a new job created distance. I hadn't realized just how much our bond had frayed until that night. He began coming over less often, but I didn't notice it at the time. Now I wonder if that distance was the beginning of something more sinister. As the night dragged on, sleep remained out of reach. My thoughts circled around Doug, our friendship, and how everything had gone so wrong. Before I knew it, the sun was rising and I hadn't slept at all. Reluctantly, I got up, realizing that avoiding the day was no longer an option. After using the bathroom, I returned to my office and considered calling in sick. I had no energy for work. As I lay back down, I heard my alarm go off upstairs. Normally, it would have signaled the start of my day if I'd been in bed with Claire. The alarm soon stopped. Claire had turned it off. I stayed still, unsure of what to expect next. Then I heard her coming downstairs, and moments later, there was a knock on my office door. "Frank, are you awake?" I pretended to be asleep, hoping she'd leave, but she opened the door and came in. "Frank, I know you're awake. We've been together for 10 years. I know how you look when you're sleeping." "What do you want, Claire?" I mumbled without turning around. "I was worried about you," she said. I snorted at the irony. She was worried after breaking my heart. "I'm fine. Go away." She didn't leave. Instead, she tried to talk about last night, claiming things got messed up. I finally sat up and faced her, noticing she looked just as sleep-deprived as I felt. "Messed up? You cheated on me with my best friend and want to leave. That's pretty clear, isn't it? Do you want to be married to me, Claire?" She fidgeted nervously and responded with, "It's not that simple, Frank." Our conversation was interrupted by our daughters, Kelly and Stacy, coming downstairs. We silently agreed to put the discussion on hold as we shifted into the morning routine. Despite the tension, we managed to prepare the girls for their day and then went our separate ways, avoiding any more talk about the elephant in the room. I decided to go to work, not ready to be alone with Claire. On the drive, my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and exhaustion, but once I arrived, I focused on work, pushing thoughts of Claire aside. Our company was on the verge of creating a new engine with greater horsepower and fuel efficiency, but it kept failing the tests. My mind immediately shifted to solving those problems. Thomas, my eager intern, met me at the door with coffee, ready to impress me with his ideas. He mentioned trying to reach me last night, but I cut him off. No need to think about Claire right now. We discussed his theory about the engine's cooling issue, and though we were already working on it, I encouraged him to keep going. As I prepared for the day, I stopped by my assistant Sarah's desk. She noticed something was off and asked if I was okay. I appreciated her concern but kept it brief, saying I was fine. The day went on as expected, including a tedious meeting with the department heads. By the time I left work, it was dark outside. As I started my car, I found comfort in the smooth, quiet engine, a reminder of what I loved about engineering. Unlike loud muscle cars, I preferred the sleek luxury of a silent, powerful machine. Have you ever seen an ad for an Aston Martin or a Tesla? Probably not, because they don't need one. Just sitting in one boosts your status. A man's car reflects who he is. Muscle cars are all about showing off masculinity, while luxury cars represent wealth. Someone might park a Mustang or a Challenger outside their apartment, but a new BMW or Porsche typically sits in the driveway of a nice home, right next to their spouse's luxury car. That's the point. I know it sounds superficial, but growing up, I didn't have money. My dad was a mechanic and my mom worked at Walmart. We weren't poor by normal standards, but the high school I attended was in a wealthy area. These kids had everything. Designer clothes, expensive cars on their 16th birthdays, and any problem they faced was solved with a call to their parents. My life was different. My clothes were ordinary, and my first car was a Neon that I worked at Best Buy to afford. Though I wasn't poor compared to them, I might as well have been. My only advantage was that I was smarter than 95% of the school. I worked hard because I was determined to have the life I never had. My kids would be the ones others envied. Thinking about them reminded me of what awaited me at home, my family, my unhappy wife. The drive home was silent, giving me no escape from replaying last night's conversation. Claire didn't feel loved by me, but Doug made her feel special. The anger and hurt I felt last night had now turned into a numb detachment. I couldn't avoid it anymore. The drive forced me to dwell on it. I dreaded the confrontation, but I knew it was inevitable. When I finally walked in the door, it was anticlimactic. The girls were in the living room, Stacy doing homework and Kelly coloring. Claire was on the couch with her laptop, the TV playing SpongeBob. "Hi, Daddy," Stacy greeted me while Kelly remained focused on her coloring. Claire looked up with a cautious expression, trying to gauge my mood. "Hi, honey, how was work?" she asked, trying to sound normal, likely for the girls' sake. I decided to play along for now, but I wasn't going to pretend nothing happened. "It was work," I replied flatly. She nodded, accepting the uneasy truce. "I made you a plate, it's in the microwave. It might be cold now since you weren't here when we ate," she added, her tone hinting at resentment. Was this her way of justifying her actions? "Well, I had a long day at work, got to earn for the family," I shot back, sensing the tension. We both had more to say, but we couldn't. Not in front of the girls. The ceasefire held, but the real confrontation was looming. Later, when the girls were in bed, Claire approached me in my office. "So, are we finally going to talk about this?" she asked from the doorway. I turned to face her. "Inside," I said, watching as she came in and closed the door. She sat on the couch that had become my temporary bed. "I'm sorry, Frank. I never wanted to hurt you. Things have been off for a while, and I don't know what to say." "Start by telling me about you and Doug," I demanded, my voice surprisingly calm. "I don't need apologies. Just tell me about your relationship with my ex-best friend." The anger I'd buried all day was starting to rise, and I was oddly relieved to feel something again. "It started about a year ago," she said, tearing up. "Doug has always been there, but I didn't start seeing him differently until then. You were gone so much after your promotion, and I felt overwhelmed doing everything alone. Doug started helping out, just being there to listen. He was sweet." She even smiled nostalgically, which only fueled my anger. "Sweet? Is that how you justify this? I forgot your birthday, so you slept with my best friend. Does that make us even?" "We didn't have sex that night. He just listened while I cried about how you were never around." "So when did listening turn into sex? Don't try to blame it on me forgetting your birthday." She stood up, her voice hardening. "You think this is just about one birthday? What about all the anniversaries, date nights, and vacations you missed because of work? All the times you were physically here but mentally absent?" "You still haven't answered. When did the affair start?" "Around April," she said quietly. 6 months ago. Right when Doug stopped coming by. "Where? My bed, on the couch, a hotel?" "Yes," she admitted, meaning all of the above. Do you love him? I asked, my voice cracking as the hurt I'd been holding back began to surface. I think so, she replied, looking away. Do you still love me? Another vulnerable question. Yes, but it's not the same. Not like it should be. Not like a wife should love her husband. I finished for her. Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. We sat in silence, the weight of the situation pressing down on us. Finally, she asked softly, "So, what do we do now?" I sighed, my voice full of pain. "What do you think we do?" I knew what she was really asking. She wanted me to make it okay, to give her permission to move on. But I wasn't going to make it easy for her. I refused to clear her conscience or accept her betrayal. You want to leave, end the marriage? Fine, you take the lead. Find a lawyer, serve me divorce papers, move out, and explain to the kids why our family is falling apart. You started this mess, you finish it. Frank, don't frank me. What did you expect me to say? That I hope you find happiness? That I'm sorry for forgetting your birthday? You cheated, and now you want to talk like adults. Adults don't cheat, Claire. Now get out before I say something you'll regret hearing. She left my office after that. If life were simple, I'd have been served divorce papers the next day. But it wasn't that easy. About a week later, Claire started looking for a lawyer, and watching her do it was painful. Seeing her intensely searching online, then leaving the room with her phone made it clear she was serious. I realized I had to find a lawyer too. My assistant, Sarah, referred me to Terrence Ross, our company's lawyer. Though not a divorce lawyer, he could connect me with the right person. I met him at his office, and after some small talk, he asked about my situation. My wife's filing for divorce. She cheated on me, I explained. Terrence, or Terry, sympathized. I went through a messy divorce myself. It's tough. So what do you want out of this? Do you want to end things peacefully or destroy her? He described two options. Mike, the Navy SEAL who resolves things quietly and efficiently, and Phil, the Marine who scorches the earth and leaves nothing behind. Both had their merits, depending on how much I wanted to fight. I'm not sure yet, I admitted. It depends on her. Terry advised me not to wait too long. In divorce cases, the one who strikes first usually gets the upper hand. Don't let indecision leave you at a disadvantage. I left his office feeling worse than when I arrived. By putting the burden of the divorce on Claire, I secretly hoped she might change her mind, but seeing her pursue it so seriously made me realize she was done with me. Now, facing my own decisions, I wondered if she ever really loved me. While I hesitated, Claire was moving full steam ahead, wanting to be free of me. What were my options? Try to win her back, quit my job, or follow my logical side, protect my assets, and prepare for the inevitable? My brain gave me a clear to-do list, but hope held me back. I waited for her next move, leaving space for her to change her mind. Hope, both a strength and a weakness. The next morning, I quietly dressed for work in the bedroom we used to share. Looking at Claire asleep in just a t-shirt, I realized how beautiful she was, and how much I'd taken her for granted. Suddenly, I wanted her in a way I hadn't in a long time. I touched her waist gently, but then she murmured, "Yes, Doug, yes." I've never gone from aroused to crushed so fast. My heart felt like it was being stabbed. The bond of hope finally broke. I knew I had lost her. Our marriage was over. With tears in my eyes, I left the room, ignoring her as she tried to call out to me. I locked myself in my office and cried harder than I ever had. Claire came in apologizing, but I pushed her out, slamming the door. Fueled by rage, I drove to Doug's place, pounding on his door, ready to confront him. Neighbors peeked out, but I didn't care. My only goal was to hurt him as much as I was hurting. Then my phone rang, Claire. She warned me that Doug had called the cops, and they were on their way. She told me to think about the girls and my job. Despite my anger, I knew she was right. I couldn't lose everything over this. I left, but not before yelling one final threat at Doug. Driving away, I tried to suppress the tears. I was exhausted, tired of hoping, tired of praying for a miracle. Claire wanted Doug, not me. As I sped through a stop sign, I nearly hit a mother and child. The close call shook me to my core. I pulled over, realizing I wasn't in the right state of mind to drive. It was time to accept the truth. My marriage was over. There was no saving it. I took out Terry's card, the lawyer who had offered me two options, peaceful or aggressive. I called his office and asked for the Marine. "Frank, what happened?" Terry asked. She called out Doug's name while I was touching her, I said, my voice filled with humiliation. "Listen, Frank, you need to take a step back. Go to a hotel, clear your head. Now isn't the time to make decisions," he advised. I hesitated, feeling the weight of his words. He reminded me that decisions made in anger are often regretted. Terry was right. I cared about what happened next. I needed to think clearly before making any moves. I started calming down, realizing Terry was right. The last thing I wanted was to turn this into a war, especially with my kids caught in the middle. Despite everything, I still loved my girls and didn't want to make things worse for them. But I still wanted Claire and Doug to face consequences for what they did. What do I do, Terry? I'm falling apart here. My heart shattered, and they're acting like I'm the bad guy. What do I do? I slumped over the steering wheel, overwhelmed by the chaos in my life. For someone used to being in control, this was the worst feeling. Terry's voice broke through my thoughts. I'm going to do something unconventional. I'm texting you an address. Meet me there. You need a drink. I'm not sure, Terry. This isn't up for debate. I'll be there in 15 minutes. He hung up, leaving no room for argument. Minutes later, I got a message. Mario's Gentleman's Lounge, a strip club. My life's falling apart, and he thinks a lap dance will help. Inside the club, a glittery woman with a seductive voice greeted me. Her minimal outfit and flawless beauty captured my attention despite my mood. I'm here to meet Terry, I stammered. You're Frank? I'm Starlet. Terry told me to bring you to him. She led me to the VIP section, her hips swaying as I followed. Terry greeted me with a drink, surrounded by beautiful women. Unlike the chaotic downstairs, the VIP area was calm, with soft lighting and jazz music. Starlet took my hand and led me to a secluded corner, where she straddled me, her touch sending shivers through me. This your first lap dance? She asked softly, her eyes locked on mine. Yeah, that obvious? I replied, trying to relax. She laughed. I haven't even started yet, sweetie. As the music played, I let myself get lost in the moment. For a while, my worries faded. Terry's plan to clear my head was working. After an hour, Terry cleared the room and got serious. Now that your mind's clear, let's talk. Think about what you want when all this is over. What can you live with? I took a sip of warm beer, considering his words. I just want what's fair, but most of all, I want to protect my kids. Terry nodded and handed me a card. Call Mike tomorrow. I'll let him know to expect you. As Terry prepared to leave, I asked, Do you miss your ex, Terry? Do you wish things had worked out? He paused, a sad look crossing his face. Every day. He then shared his own regrets, admitting he cheated on his wife and destroyed their marriage. She's better off now, married to a school teacher. I'm a lawyer with money, but she's happier with him. Terry shook off his memories and mentioned that Starlet offered more than just lap dances, hinting at her other services. Have you? I asked, trying to wrap my head around it. Not for money, he replied with a grin, but we've had our moments. She's great at relieving stress. Terry's words hung in the air as I processed everything. I wasn't sure what to make of it, but one thing was clear. I needed to move forward. I have to admit, after hearing what Terry said about Starlet, I saw her differently. I knew she was a dancer, but I didn't expect her to also be promiscuous. I thought there was some kind of connection between us. Chemistry, maybe. Not that I was thinking of anything serious, but it felt like there were sparks. The flirting, hand-holding, the way she looked at me, it seemed like it meant something. But maybe I was just projecting. After all, flirting is part of her job, right? The idea of being with Starlet was tempting. She was gorgeous, and I hadn't been with anyone in a while, but paying for it, that felt wrong, especially with everything else going on. So when Terry asked if I wanted her to come up, I declined. Nah, I need to head out. Thanks for calming me down, Terry. I appreciate it. Anytime, Frank. Good luck. The next morning, Doug walked into his office and nearly lost it when he saw me sitting in his chair. What the? Morning, Doug, I said, overly cheerful. Frank, how did you get in here? You've got 10 seconds before I call security, he said, grabbing his phone. Put the phone down, Doug. I just want to talk. You owe me that much. He hesitated. I don't want any trouble, Frank. If you want to talk, fine, but this is my job. Don't mess that up for me. I wanted to knock him out, but I knew that wouldn't help. I needed answers, and violence wouldn't get me any. You've got a lot of nerve talking about not making trouble after what you did. At least he looked a little ashamed. I'm sorry, Frank, I really am. It's been eating at me. I struggled to stay calm. Eating at you? You're sorry. What exactly are you sorry for, Doug? For stabbing me in the back? Ruining my marriage? Breaking up my family? 13 years of friendship down the drain? What part of that are you sorry for? He tried to explain, but his apologies sounded hollow. Frank, I know I betrayed you. I regret it, but what? You were never there for her. She needed you, and you weren't there. I stood up and got in his face. He didn't back down. Is that what you tell yourself to sleep at night? That I had this coming because I was working hard to support my family? Doug kept pushing. You didn't want a family, Frank. You could have made time for her, but you didn't. His self-righteous attitude infuriated me. You think you know what it takes to be a husband because you whispered sweet things to my wife? You know nothing. You think because you've been with her for a few months, you understand what it means to be a part of this family? I challenged him with personal questions about my daughters, questions he couldn't answer. You don't even know my girls, Doug. You only know what happens in bed with Claire, but marriage is about everything after that. Doug tried to respond, but his voice lacked the confidence it had before. Frank, I love her. Save it, Doug. If you could betray me after 13 years of friendship, how do you think you'll manage a marriage? You don't understand what it means to protect a family. As I walked out, Doug said, whether you believe it or not, I love her. I stopped and shook my head. I don't ever want to see you again, Doug. This is your only warning. One day you'll answer for this. Maybe not today or tomorrow, but it'll happen. Then, I left him, at least for now. As months passed, the divorce process gained momentum. Claire had found a decent lawyer, which brought some relief. We both continued living in the house, with me using my office as a permanent sleeping space. We reached a truce of sorts. While the pain and anger lingered, they became more of a dull ache. Occasionally, something would trigger a flare-up, like overhearing her giggling on the phone, or seeing a gift I didn't give her. But those moments became less frequent. We interacted when necessary, mainly for the girls, keeping up appearances for their sake. We were friendly on the surface, but closeness was off limits. It was the best possible outcome in a bad situation. I know it's cliché for a divorced man to throw himself into work, but for me it wasn't much different. I just didn't feel guilty about it anymore. I hadn't heard from Doug since our confrontation, and a part of me missed the camaraderie we had. Making friends wasn't easy for me, and now I had no one but work. Claire, meanwhile, seemed to be moving on. I suspected she was still seeing Doug, though I didn't ask. She'd go out with flimsy excuses. And while she wasn't trying to hide it, she also wasn't rubbing it in my face. I appreciated that, but it didn't ease the lingering anger and jealousy. She had the chance to move on, and I was stuck alone. It burned. Life probably would have continued like this until the divorce was final, but one evening, Stacy came into my office. Daddy, Mrs. Benson needs the money for my cheerleading uniform tomorrow. Mommy forgot to give it to me. I vaguely remembered Claire mentioning cheerleading, but I hadn't realized it had progressed this far. When I asked how much it was, Stacy proudly announced, $98.99. I almost choked. After she left, I was hit with a wave of guilt. I didn't even know she was in cheerleading. What kind of father was I? That thought haunted me. I realized that Claire had likely been covering for me, making excuses to the girls about my absence. But I wasn't a soldier away on duty. I was here, just choosing work over them. The truth was, I enjoyed work more than I enjoyed being at home. I'd always justified it as working for them, but I couldn't keep lying to myself. I didn't have to work 80 hours a week. I did it because I wanted to. Facing this truth was hard. I realized I'd been hiding behind work, avoiding the responsibilities of being a father and husband. I closed my laptop and decided to change that. Girls, who wants pizza and ice cream? I called out, and their joyful screams were music to my ears. Later, as we sat in a restaurant with half-eaten pizza and empty ice cream bowls, I got a panicked text from Claire. Emergency, call me immediately. The girls are gone. I thought you were staying home with them. Please get home so we can find them. I quickly replied, letting her know they were with me. Thank God, she responded. Then another message came through. You took the girls out? I didn't reply. My daughters were too busy serenading me with Let It Go from Frozen, and I recorded the moment as the whole restaurant cheered them on. For the first time in a long time, I felt connected to my girls. What my daughters did next completely floored me. Instead of getting embarrassed when they realized they had an audience, Stacy stood up and took a bow, soon joined by Kelly. They bowed and blew kisses as if they had just finished a Broadway performance. It was both hilarious and heartwarming watching them. I realized how much I had missed over the years while I was busy with work. If I hadn't taken them out tonight, I would have missed this precious moment too. I didn't want to look back years from now and regret not having memories like this. When my girls bring home boyfriends or fiancés, I want to embarrass them with stories like tonight. After the excitement died down, I paid the bill and we headed home. As we got in the car, Stacy said, "Thank you for the ice cream, Daddy. I like it when you take us out." "You're welcome, sweet pea. Thanks for the song," I replied. "You're the best daddy ever." She giggled before both girls quickly fell asleep. I drove home in silence, reflecting on her words. Kids rarely see their parents' flaws when they're young, even when they're neglected. When we arrived, I texted Claire, "In driveway, girls asleep, need help." She soon came out and we carried our daughters to their rooms. Afterward, we met in the hallway. "So, you stopped working long enough to take them out?" I bet they loved that. "What did you guys do?" she asked, surprised. "We had pizza and ice cream, and then they sang for me." "You should have seen them, Claire. They were amazing. The whole restaurant cheered them on. They even took a bow." I laughed, showing her the video. We shared a moment, but it felt strange being that close to her after everything. She stepped back, clearly feeling it too. "I'm glad you spent time with them. You should do that more often," she said, her voice trailing off. "Yeah, I know. Tonight was a wake-up call. I don't want to miss out on their childhood. I've already lost you. I don't want to lose them too." She looked at me strangely, trying to gauge if I was sincere. After a pause, she said, "No matter what you do, they'll always love you. That's how kids are." "Too bad adults aren't like that," I muttered, unintentionally loud enough for her to hear. Regret crossed her face and she said, "Frank, don't start." I felt the urge to apologize, but held back. Why apologize for the truth? Instead, I asked, "Was I really that bad, Claire? Bad enough for you to stop loving me?" Of course, I feel bad every time I think about the plans we had. The memories we're going to have to tell the girls soon, and it'll break their hearts. And it was my decision that set all of this in motion. "So why did you do it?" I asked, seeing tears in her eyes. "I was lonely, Frank. I had everything, nice clothes, a fancy car, but I was miserable. I just wanted some time with you, small signs that I mattered, but you always made time for everything else, and Doug gives you that?" She nodded. "Yes, he makes me feel wanted. He texts, sends flowers, likes being around me." "Is that what you wanted to hear?" It wasn't, but I needed to know. "Well, soon you two can be together and ride off into the sunset," I said bitterly. "Don't do this, Frank. What's done is done. Talking like this will only cause more pain." I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. "You set us on this road, Claire. Now you want to avoid the pain?" Her expression hardened. "In case you forgot, you neglected me first," I snapped. "I'm so tired of that excuse. You cheated on me with my best friend. Does anything I did justify that?" She had no answer, and her silence spoke volumes. I pressed on. "Tonight made me realize how I contributed to this mess, but you didn't try to fix it, Claire. Did you ever suggest counseling? Did you do anything to save our marriage? I came to you and you ignored me. So, your next step was to cheat. If you cared about this marriage, why didn't you try harder? Instead, you gave up and found someone else." She started crying. "I couldn't do it anymore. I was drained." "I'm tired too, Claire. I'm going to bed." With that, I went to my office and closed the door. A few weeks later, the divorce papers arrived. It was official. My marriage was over. The divorce itself was relatively amicable, though that didn't make it any less painful. The material assets were split fairly, with Claire getting the house since she had primary custody of the kids. I agreed to child support, but paying spousal support to the woman who broke up our family felt like a slap in the face. Still, it could have been worse. Thanks to my lawyer, I avoided losing even more financially. I was okay, but emotionally, I felt like I had taken on the heavier burden. Claire may have walked away with the house, but I was left with the weight of it all. As I thought about my girls, I questioned the wisdom of keeping the truth from them. Why had we chosen to pretend everything was fine instead of gradually preparing them? We'd be blindsiding them with the reality of our situation. I can't claim that our secrecy was out of love, it was fear. I was done hiding behind excuses, pretending my bad decisions were made to protect others. In reality, I was just a coward. Claire likely had similar reasons, but I couldn't let her self-rationalization dictate my actions anymore. My dad used to say, "Tomorrow's man is made by today's choices." Back then, I didn't grasp the meaning, but now it was my guiding principle. The man I am today is a result of prioritizing work over my family yesterday. If I don't like that man, I need to change him today. I wanted to be a good dad and successful at work. Why couldn't I have both? It was time to rebalance my life. No more choosing work over my daughters. So, I did what I do best. I made a plan. I realized that if balance was my problem, there was an equation to solve it. With 168 hours in a week, I had been spending 80 at work, leaving only 88 for everything else, including sleep. No wonder I'd been failing as a father. I needed to allocate my time better. I owed it to my daughters to be worthy of their love. As I reflected, I heard Claire crying in the room we once shared. She was lying on the bed sobbing, the divorce papers nearby. Seeing her finally express emotion over our failed marriage didn't hit me as hard as it once would have. I'd been dealing with the end for a while, ever since she called out Doug's name in bed. Now, reality was catching up with her too. I quietly closed the door and let her have her moment. Things were about to get harder. We still had to tell the girls. Needing a distraction, my mind drifted to Starlet, the woman from the club. Despite Terry's claims about her, I felt a connection with her. So I drove to Mario's Gentleman's Lounge, where I was greeted by a young woman. I asked if Starlet was there, and she went to find her. When Starlet arrived, she didn't seem to recognize me, which was disappointing but expected. I told her I'd come in a few months ago, and she made me feel better with her dances. She smiled and offered me another dance, leading me to a private area. As she held my hand, I realized how much I craved that connection again. Upstairs in the champagne room, she asked what I wanted. I was honest, I wasn't sure. She straddled me, whispering in my ear, asking if I wanted more than a lap dance. When I admitted I wanted her, she smiled and made her terms clear: a room, a ride after work, and $300. It was a moment of decision, and I had to choose what came next. That's exactly what happened. I booked a room by the beach with a balcony overlooking the ocean. It was peak season, so it cost $350 a night. I didn't want it to be too flashy, but still nice enough to avoid seeming cheap. She came out of the club around 2:30, spotting me by my car. As she walked over, I noticed she looked different, still sexy, but more real. Gone was the exaggerated makeup, replaced by glasses and a simple ponytail. "Hey Frank, I almost didn't expect you to show up," she said with a smile that seemed a little off. I opened the car door for her, and once I got in, she gently touched my hand. "Do you have something for me?" I handed her an envelope with the money, which she quickly tucked away. As we drove off, she complimented my car and asked about my job. I told her I was an engineer and had designed the engine in the car. She seemed impressed, but when she mentioned how good I was at my job, it made me think of the sacrifices I'd made to get there. Sensing the change in mood, she asked if she'd said something wrong. I brushed it off, and we sat in silence for a bit. When I asked if she was hungry, she declined, preferring to get straight to business. Her words felt cold, like this was just a transaction, which of course it was. When we got to the room, she shifted into her seductive persona, asking what I wanted to do, but now I saw through the act. It wasn't her, it was just a performance. The fantasy had shattered, and I wasn't interested anymore. As she tried to initiate, I stopped her. Confused, she asked what I wanted, but I just wanted to talk. Frustrated, she eventually demanded I take her back to the club. She saw right through me, realizing I was looking for a girlfriend experience, not just sex. When she mentioned my wife, the tears I'd been holding back finally flowed. She softened, realizing what was really going on. After I broke down, she comforted me, and we sat in silence for a while. When I was done crying, she apologized but made it clear she couldn't give me what I wanted, only sex, not emotional connection. I understood and didn't push it. As she prepared to leave, she tried to return the money, but I insisted she keep it. Despite no sex, she had helped me that night in a way I didn't expect. As we drove back to the club, she suddenly suggested we grab a bite at IHOP. I agreed, joking about unlimited pancakes. On the way, I asked her real name. After a pause, she revealed it was Cassandra, or Sandra for short. We shared a light-hearted moment, and as I caught a glimpse of her smiling in the car window, I realized it really was nice to meet her. I watched in amazement as Sandra devoured every bite of her food. Pancakes, eggs, bacon, all gone. She must have noticed my gaze because she looked up with an irritated expression. "What?" she asked, her mouth full of food. "Nothing. You just eat like a starving person. I was about to give you $1 and ask you to wash my windshield." She smirked, or at least tried to, considering her mouth was full. After swallowing, she replied, "Oh, so you're funny now? Weren't you just bawling like a little girl an hour ago?" Something must have shown on my face because her expression softened. "Frank, I'm sorry. I was just joking. I didn't mean—" I waved it off. "It's fine. You're not wrong. I'm just dealing with a lot." She nodded, taking a sip of her orange juice. An awkward silence followed. "Do you want to talk about it? I might be a dancer and promiscuous, but I'm also a good listener," she offered with a self-deprecating laugh. For a moment, I glimpsed a vulnerable side of her, but it vanished quickly. Despite everything, I felt comfortable around her, like I understood her. Even though most of our interaction was superficial, there was a connection. "It's a long, boring story. Trust me, you don't want to hear it." She smiled warmly. "You paid me $300 and bought me breakfast. I'm pretty sure sex is off the table, so think of this as getting your money's worth." We both laughed at that, and then I found myself telling her everything, from the night Claire revealed she was unhappy to the night I met Sandra. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she broke the silence with, "If you don't mind me saying, your ex-wife is a real witch." Surprisingly, it felt good to hear someone take my side for once. She continued, "I get her frustrations, but to sleep with your best friend? That's low. No one gives you a reason to fight for something. You do it because losing it is worse than the struggle. That's the difference between love and everything else. Love is its own reason to fight." I was amazed by her insight. She noticed and laughed. "What, a dancer can't be deep?" I laughed too. "I guess you know more about life than most people." Her expression darkened. "More than normal people? What's that supposed to mean? You think I'm damaged because I'm a dancer?" I quickly clarified, "No. I just meant you've probably encountered all kinds of people with their stories. You knew exactly what I was after when I walked into that club, which means you've seen others like me. Whatever, she muttered, looking down at the menu. After a pause, her mood lightened again. She looked up at me with a playful glint in her eye. Would you let me get a slice of apple pie? If I blow you? I noticed how easily she switched personas. Sandra had built walls around herself, using different identities to keep people at a distance. But I saw through that and found her intriguing enough to try and get to know her better. Have you ever been in love? I asked. She stiffened, and her face clouded with a sadness she couldn't hide. Her reaction was enough to answer my question. Clearly, she had been hurt before. I wanted to know more about her past, but she changed the subject. Frank, it's late. I need to get home and sleep. 5 a.m. is way past my bedtime, she said, redirecting the conversation. I hadn't realized how late it was. Wow, it's 5 already? I checked my watch. Time had flown by. Yep, time flies when you're with me. I have that effect, she teased. Frustrating is more like it. We spent all night talking about me, and I still don't know anything about you. For a moment, her guard dropped, her eyes softened, and she replied, It would cost you a lot more than $300 to learn about me. What about $300 in breakfast? I joked. She laughed, a real, genuine laugh. Frank, we need to go. I need sleep. Some of us have to work for a living, she said, sliding out of the booth and grabbing her purse, signaling that our conversation was over. I do work a lot. That's the main reason my wife left me. Well, when you do your job in 6-inch heels and lingerie, we'll compare notes, she quipped, making us both laugh. The waitress brought the check, and after paying and tipping, we left. The drive back to the club was quick, and soon we were parked by her car. Well, Frank, it's been a while since a man has lasted all night with me. You've got some stamina, she joked, falling back on her usual playful banter, but I wasn't going to let her dismiss the night with humor. Sandra, you helped me tonight. I don't let many people in, but I'm glad I let you in. Thank you. For the first time, her guard completely dropped. She genuinely looked into my eyes and said, Anytime, Frank. I hope everything works out for you. You're a good guy. You deserve better. She kissed me softly on the lips, a gentle, friendly kiss, then got into her car and drove off. I headed back to my hotel, deciding to extend my stay for another night. As I slept, I felt a sense of relief I hadn't experienced in a long time. The pain was still there, but it was starting to ease. About a week later, back at my house, Claire knocked on my office door, sounding apprehensive. After my nights in the hotel, I felt clearer, like I'd turned a corner. I found it amusing that Claire seemed concerned about where I had been, as if I owed her an explanation. Of course, I reassured her that nothing happened, but honestly, I didn't care what she thought anymore. I started preparing to leave my home, renting a storage unit and moving some of my belongings there. I also began searching for a new place to stay, considering a condo, near work, or a townhouse close to Claire and the girls. It felt like I was finally nearing the end of this ordeal until tonight. What is it, Claire? I asked flatly, not really wanting to deal with her. Despite my tone, she took my acknowledgement as an invitation and walked into my office. When I turned to face her, it was clear she had been crying. Her face was puffy with dried tear stains. I just wanted to check on you, see how you were doing. How sweet, I replied sarcastically. The truth was, I was furious with her. Tonight, we had broken the news to the girls about our divorce. Telling a 5- and 8-year-old that their parents were splitting up was heartbreaking, and I had to be the one to shatter their world. Claire's unhappiness felt insignificant compared to the pain I had to put my daughters through. So yeah, I'm just peachy, thanks for asking. Frank, Claire, what do you want from me? I snapped, tossing the pen I was holding onto the desk. It skittered off the edge with more force than I intended. You wanted freedom, I gave you that. You wanted half of everything except what you didn't know about, I gave you that. Alimony, child support, our kids, I gave you everything. What more do you want from me? I just wanted to talk. I laughed bitterly. Talk? Now you want to talk? Too late. I had to break our daughters' hearts today. Tell them that mommy and daddy can't get their act together because mommy slept with daddy's best friend. So no, I don't have any sympathy left for you. If you need comfort, find someone who doesn't care that you destroyed our family. Maybe your boyfriend? She looked shocked. Do you have to be like this now? Of all times, can't you just be human? I was there too. I know you're hurting, Frank, and so am I. Who cares if you're hurting? I shot back. You made this mess, and we're all suffering because of it. Go find Doug, spread your legs, and let him comfort you. He was so helpful when you needed to move on from me. I'm sure he can help you forget the pain you've caused our daughters. We both put them through this, Frank. We both played a part. Oh yeah, I worked too hard, and you slept with my best friend. Totally equal. I couldn't stomach her excuse. You're delusional if you think I'm going to accept that I was lonely excuse. "You're such an a-hole," she snapped before storming out of my office. "At least I'm not a cheater," I yelled after her. She didn't respond, but I knew she heard me. Was I being childish? Sure. Did it feel good? Not really. It was just a way to vent my frustration. The pain of looking into my kids' eyes and breaking their hearts is a kind of agony that few things can compare to. That night with Sandra had helped me take a step forward, but tonight, I took a giant leap backward. The next day at work, I was summoned to another meeting with the higher-ups. I groaned when Sarah, my assistant, delivered the news. We had just had a meeting not long ago. What could they want now? "Calm down, Mr. Underwood, you know how they are, a bunch of pencil pushers. Don't let them see your frustration," Sarah advised. "What more could they want? I just gave them a progress report. Can't they just let me do my job?" She hesitated, then leaned in. "I don't think this is about the engine." I was intrigued. Sarah always seemed to know things before I did. "What's it about?" She smiled slightly. "Your old friend Mr. Stamper, Doug." She nodded knowingly. I wondered how much she knew about my situation. She was aware of my divorce because she had referred me to Terry, but I hadn't shared details yet. Now, she spoke to me like we were on the same side against Doug. How did she know so much? Why would they be meeting with me about him? I asked. She lowered her voice. "I heard he stole some company secrets when he left. They might be planning to sue him or something." Hearing that Doug might be in trouble actually brightened my day a bit. Still, I couldn't believe he would be that foolish. "Why involve me?" I asked. She shrugged, but looked like she wanted to say more when someone approached from behind me. "Excuse me, I'm looking for Frank Underwood," a young man's voice said. "I'm Frank. How can I help you?" He introduced himself as Jason Morrison from the security company contracted to upgrade our system. He needed access to passwords, security logs, and other information and would be around for about a week. I sighed. "Look, Jason, I'm swamped. My assistant Sarah can help you with whatever you need." Sarah didn't seem to mind at all, and I left them to it. As I walked away, I almost laughed to myself. Watching Sarah's infatuation with Jason reminded me of how things started with Claire. Love begins with infatuation, all excitement and butterflies, until it all goes downhill. I was brought into the boardroom, and it was clear this meeting wasn't just a progress report. Along with the usual company heads, Terry and a few other lawyers were present, adding to the tension. "Good morning, Mr. Underwood. I'm Terrence Ross. We have a few questions about a former associate of yours, Mr. Douglas Stamper. You worked together for years and became good friends, correct?" Terry knew I remembered Doug. I had already told him everything, but he was doing his job, making things clear for everyone present, including the stenographer typing away. "Yes, I remember him. We worked together and we were friends, but I haven't spoken to him in months. What's this about?" I expected Terry to mention Doug's involvement in my divorce, but he kept the issues separate. "Do you recognize this?" he asked, sliding a paper over to me. It was a schematic, and my heart sank. I knew this drawing. It was the propulsion system schematic Doug and I had stolen from another intern, Donald. This was bad news. "I think I've seen this before, but I'm not sure. Why are you asking me this?" I replied nervously, feeling the weight of past mistakes catching up to me. "We believe Mr. Stamper developed this while working here, using company resources. He recently patented it, and his company plans to launch it soon. If he created it here, we could claim it as ours." "Wait, Doug developed this?" I asked, stunned. "Doug didn't come up with the design, Donald did. We stole it to prevent Donald from outshining us. But I thought Doug had returned it after we got hired. Apparently he didn't. Now I faced a moral dilemma. Should I expose Doug for stealing the design? I thought about how he betrayed me, and the choice became easier. My conscience would be fine. "I recognize this schematic, Mr. Ross, but Doug didn't create it. He stole it from another intern." The room fell silent. No one, not even Terry, expected that. "So Mr. Stamper stole this design and passed it off as his own?" one of the company heads asked. Terry eyed me cautiously. "Yes, that's exactly what happened," I confirmed. The stenographer's fingers flew across the keyboard. "Who is this intern?" someone asked. "His name was Donald. I don't remember his last name." "Did you witness Mr. Stamper stealing the schematic?" Terry asked, his tone urging caution. "Yes, I saw him do it," I replied. Terry winced slightly but continued taking notes. Terry summarized, "You, Mr. Stamper, and the intern went out for drinks, got inebriated. And then, Mr. Stamper stole the schematic from the intern's laptop. Is that correct?" "Yes," I confirmed, though I carefully distanced myself from the laptop destruction and theft. I admitted I knew about Doug's plan, but claimed I had warned him against it. The heads seemed satisfied, and even Terry looked convinced. "Thank you for your honesty, Mr. Underwood. We'll contact Donald to verify your story and decide our next steps. We appreciate your willingness to testify against a former friend," one of the heads said. with a hint of sarcasm, to which Terry responded with a smirk. I returned his look with an innocent expression. If we can challenge the patent and get it revoked, we could claim the design. We need to find Donald immediately, another head said, clearly excited by the potential. He might have emailed the design to himself using his company email, I suggested. They nodded, discussing their next move. Frank, could this design help solve our current engine issues? Someone asked. Maybe. If we bring Donald on board, I'm sure he could contribute more ideas, I replied, noticing the satisfied smiles around the table. In the end, I helped the company while delivering justice to Doug. After all, who wouldn't enjoy putting a backstabbing former friend in his place? About a week passed before I heard anything more about the situation. By then, I had decided to bid on the townhouse near my daughters. I realized that living closer to them would help me stay focused on what truly mattered. Moving to the condo near my job might lead me to overwork and lose sight of my priorities. Passing by my old house daily would remind me to prioritize my girls. I was at an amusement park with my daughters when Doug called. My girls were busy indulging in snacks, so I stepped away to answer, knowing this conversation likely wouldn't be kid-friendly. What do you want, Doug? I asked curtly. You backstabber. I know you ratted me out about the schematic. His anger amused me. Doug, you sound upset. Is there a problem? I replied, enjoying the opportunity to rub it in. He accused me of being an a-hole, but I remained calm, recognizing his desperation. Hello, Pot, I said, reminding him of his own betrayal. Doug tried to defend himself, but I dismissed his arguments. You're the one who tried to pass off stolen work as your own. Maybe if you'd focused more on your job instead of seducing my wife, you wouldn't be in this mess. He then tried pleading with me, asking for mercy. Frank, please, this is my livelihood. You're not like me, don't let my actions change who you are. His groveling was almost too good to be true. I decided to toy with him. Okay, I'll help you, but you have to stop seeing Claire. He was stunned. After a long pause, he reluctantly agreed, saying, You win. But I wasn't planning to help him at all. You really thought I'd help you? Have a nice life, Doug, I said before ending the call with a smile. Weeks passed, filled with work, time with my kids, and the ongoing battle to close on the townhouse. I was in a bidding war with a young couple, but I was determined to win for the sake of my daughters. The townhouse symbolized my commitment to them. One evening, while eating a meal Claire had prepared, she came into my office. Despite our divorce, she still cooked for me, which I found surprising. Frank, can we talk? She asked, struggling to find the right words. She eventually broke down in tears, apologizing for everything. I'm sorry for what I did with Doug. I was so unhappy and just wanted to feel better. I made a mistake, she confessed, that what started as a fling turned into something more complicated. When Doug said he loved her, I listened, nodding, as she admitted that she had fallen for him too. Crying as she spoke, I processed Claire's words, noticing more how they didn't affect me than what she actually said. Months ago, her confession would have devastated me, but now the pain just wasn't there. She admitted that realizing she loved Doug made her unhappiness with me grow. Yet, she still loved me. She hadn't planned to leave me when she confessed her affair. She had wanted to work on our marriage but ended up going along with the breakup when things got twisted. I found it hard to believe. You say you didn't plan on leaving, but I asked if you wanted to stay, and you didn't fight for us, I replied. She sniffled. I know, I would have fought for the marriage for the kids' sake if you had, but I was also okay with it ending. I thought about our past conversations. Maybe it could have been different, but we'd never know now. You didn't say that back then. Who knows if it would have changed anything, especially after you slept with my best friend. She nodded, wiping her nose. I know, I'm sorry for everything. You didn't deserve that. I regret my choices. I should have come to you before cheating with Doug, suggested counseling or something. I owed it to our marriage and the kids to try. I appreciate that. It means a lot, I said, and it did. She finally seemed to understand the depth of her betrayal. She couldn't undo what she did, but acknowledging it was all I could ask for. Curious, I asked, what made you change your mind? When I first read the divorce papers, I realized it was my doing. Telling the girls made it worse. I just knew I had to own up to my mistakes to move on, she explained. I nodded. I've been there too, realizing how much I neglected you and the girls. Through her tears, she smiled. You've been trying hard, and the girls love the extra attention. You're a great dad. Even when you were busy, well, you were a good mom, even though you cheated. We may have been lousy spouses, but our girls are proof we didn't completely fail, I joked. We laughed, and then she pulled me into a hug. That's when I started to truly forgive her. The anger and hurt were gone, replaced by a sense of nostalgic regret for what we once had. Now, she was simply the mother of my children, someone I would always care about. Later at work, Sarah greeted me with an extra bright smile. I couldn't help but ask, "What's got you glowing today?" She beamed. "Oh, just went out on a date with Jason, the security upgrade guy." I was surprised but happy for her. She shared all the details, and it was clear she was smitten. "I'm happy for you, Sarah. You deserve it," I told her sincerely. She then offered her sympathy for my situation with Doug. "I knew about it but didn't bring it up because I figured you didn't want to talk about it." I appreciated her discretion and made a mental note to one day ask how she always seemed to know everything. The day flew by with work, and before I knew it, it was 8 p.m. Time to head home and see my girls. As I walked to my car, I felt someone behind me. Suddenly, I was tackled to the ground, and Doug was on top of me, punching and shouting about how I'd ruined his life. His punches weren't landing well, but his anger was clear. I managed to push him off and stand up. Doug was breathing heavily, rage in his eyes. "Donald is suing me, and your company is giving him a job. They're taking the design from me, and it's all your fault." He lunged at me again. We weren't fighters, just two middle-aged engineers with pent-up anger. We ended up brawling like kids, each punch fueled by betrayal and regret, trying to make the other feel the same pain we did. The fight between Doug and me lasted maybe 5 minutes tops. We were so out of breath you'd think we were reenacting a battle scene from Troy. Security soon pulled us apart. Doug was furious, and it took one guard practically pinning him down to calm him. The guard holding me back, seeing I was calmer, warned me to stay put before going to help his partner with Doug. Did I feel better? A little. Violence doesn't solve everything, but sometimes it feels satisfying. Civility doesn't always work. Just ask history, and sometimes punching someone just feels good. If it didn't, action movies wouldn't be so popular. My face hurt, and my right hand was probably swelling, but I felt like I needed that release. Watching Doug get restrained while he cursed at me only added to my amusement. The more irrational he got, the funnier it became. He only stopped when the guards threatened to arrest him. They told him if he returned, he'd be charged with trespassing. Funny how life works. Not too long ago, I was the one nearly arrested for confronting Doug at his home. Now, the tables had turned. A month later, I won another battle, this time the bidding war for the townhouse near my girls. I paid $110,000 over the asking price, but it was worth it. It wasn't as big as the house I shared with Claire, but it was perfect for me. It had a decent backyard, a nice park down the street, and a bike trail leading to the beach. Moving day was bittersweet, excited for a fresh start yet nervous about the future. Luckily, Terry was there to help, a reminder that I wasn't the worst husband in the world. He may have played a bigger role in his marriage's downfall, but that made him more relatable. As we loaded the last box, Claire teared up. "So this is it," she said softly. "Yep, I'm finally out of your hair." A tear rolled down her cheek. "Yay," she joked weakly. For a moment I saw the Claire I married years ago, but life had changed us. The people we once were no longer existed. Now we were older, wiser versions of ourselves, ready to part ways. "You know, Claire, I never apologized for neglecting you all those years. You deserved better," I admitted. Tears flowed freely as she hugged me, crying on my shoulder. "Well, at least you won't have to worry about the toilet seat anymore," I joked to lighten the mood. She laughed weakly. As we let go, as I got into the moving truck, she hesitated before saying, "Frank, you can't cook worth a damn. If you're ever hungry, feel free to come over for dinner. It would be good for the girls." I hesitated, then replied, "I don't think that's a good idea, especially if Doug's around." "Oh, you don't have to worry about Doug. We're not seeing each other anymore." That was news. I wasn't upset to hear it. "What happened, if you don't mind me asking?" "Doug and I were doomed from the start. His anger toward you and everything else just made it worse. I can't have that negativity around the girls." I thought about telling her that Doug had chosen his job over her when I gave him the ultimatum, but she didn't need that right now. Instead, I hugged her one last time and got into the truck. As I drove away, Claire waved goodbye, and I headed to my new home. After moving in, Terry and I decided to grab a beer. "Want to go to Mario's?" he asked. Thinking of Mario's made me think of Sandra. I hadn't seen her since that night at IHOP. I thought of her often. "Nah, let's hit a sports bar," I replied. The truth was, I couldn't face seeing Sandra in her starlet persona again. The real connection I had made with her wasn't at the club, but during that late-night conversation over pancakes and through her comforting me when I was at my lowest. The real Sandra was a complex, caring person who hid behind a tough exterior, a heart that had been hurt too many times but still couldn't help caring. Later that night, I found myself standing in the parking lot outside Mario's when I heard Starlet's voice call out, "James, if that's you by my car, you better walk away. If I have to call Bruno, it won't end well." I quickly raised my hands in surrender. "Sandra, it's me. I'm sorry for scaring you." "Frank?" Yeah, she relaxed and walked over to me. What are you doing lurking around my car? It was late, around 2 a.m., but the streetlights and Mario's neon sign gave enough light to see her face. I didn't know how else to see you. Who's James? I thought I saw a hint of a smile before her serious expression returned. No one unimportant. Why didn't you just come inside? I nervously shoved my hands into my pockets. I didn't want to see Starlet. I wanted to see you, Frank. No, Sandra, just listen. I feel something for you. I don't know what it is, but it's something. You were there for me when I needed you. Frank, I know what you're going to say. You don't do the girlfriend thing. You're not built for it. But those are just excuses, and you know it. She didn't respond, just brushed past me and started getting into her car. So you're just going to walk away? I asked. She turned and glared at me. Yes, because I know how this ends. What do you see for us? Romantic dates and love in the moonlight? Then what? I go to work, giving lap dances and getting groped, then crawl into bed with you like everything's normal? Are you going to introduce me to your parents? Your kids? Tell them how we met? I've been down this road, Frank. It doesn't end well for me. She got into her car, but before she could back out, I jumped in front of it. Get out of the way, Frank, she shouted. I stood firm until she angrily got out. Sandra, I don't have all the answers, but I feel something for you, and I think you feel it too. We don't have to date. We can just be friends. I just want to get to know you. She crossed her arms and looked away, thinking. I stayed silent, knowing I'd said enough. God, you're annoying, she finally muttered. So is that a yes? I asked cautiously. She didn't reply, but handed me her phone. Put your number in before I change my mind. Really? Yes, hurry up. I smiled, entering my number. Her demeanor had softened, the anger fading. She stood, with her hand on her hip, but the irritation was gone. You promised to call? I asked as she took her phone back. Stop being a little girl, I'll call. Now, move before I run you over, she said, heading back to her car. I stepped aside, and as she backed up, she paused. She gave me a look, not quite a smile, but something softer. It wasn't Starlet or the cold exterior. It was Sandra. Then she looked away and drove off into the night.